Mary Stanley, who curated this exhibition, is the founder of the Young Collectors Club, is an active supporter of local arts organizations and sits on the board of many, including MOCA GA. Wanted this talk to be all about the artists, so that's what we're going to do tonight. We could talk about the nature of photography and whether we should even have talk about genres at all, given the spectrum of work that we've seen, and maybe we'll get to that later. But Mary, since she knows these artists very well, will jump in at the appropriate time to ask questions or comment. But first, I want to have the artists each spend some time talking about their work and their process and what they're doing in the future. And we'll start with Sarah. I wonder what gave you the guts to do this tableau vivant, and in addition to moving on to what effect it had on you and your career and the impact.
Sure, thank you. Hi, thanks for having us here. Thank you, Mary. Hi. So guts, it's hard to say that that's really a relevant word when it comes to making something that I want to make, because I don't really have the sense that there's a lack of control, but if my gut's leading me towards something, I just have to make it, and that's about it. So guts is kind of irrelevant. The way that the tableau came to be was I had spent the first 10 years in New York as a still photographer, and music was a sort of sidelined hobby. I got, through Craigslist, don't ask, got deeply involved in singing Bulgarian and Macedonian folk songs with a chorus, and I now have a trio, and we tour professionally, and I specialize in Bulgarian singing. So that was sidelined at the time, and my commercial photography agents at I think it was 2009, came to me and said they wanted to have me think about my annual marketing event of the year and what we might do that would be attention drawing at a party. And they said, would you mind considering maybe staging a live photo shoot for the people at the party? And I thought, probably no, because it's a private experience that I have with myself and my subjects. But I was very excited about the idea of bringing to life the concepts I had been exploring in the delirium constructions. So I just sort of started playing with the idea of a live version of that, and working with different models I had worked with over the years, and crafting gestural relationships between them. And then I just kind of, I don't know, I gathered about 30 people and staged this thing on platforms. And then at the very last minute, I thought, I feel like there can be sound, and you know what I'm doing in Bulgarian singing isn't actually that far away in conceptual intent to the visual exploration, which is kind of the merging in and out, moving in and out between harmony and dissonance, and what the kind of tension is between like a resolution that feels, resolute and tenseness or something. So anyway, last minute I decided to invite my Bulgarian quartet into the piece, and it was going to be a one-off experience. And then after the piece was over, I found myself in tears, and I felt the energy of the party goers, the audience or whatever around me, and it felt very profound and very important. And I looked to the person who was helping me put the event together, and I said, oh my God, I have to do it again with like 120 people. It's just a kind of a random number, but I like numerology, so I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing it again with 120 people. And so I worked on that, from a production standpoint, and fundraised for that whole next 3.5 years, and then put that piece together. So that was how the tableau vivant of the Delirium Constructions was born.
It's also true that she got her minister's license online so that she could marry people as part of her tableau, which I love. If anybody needs to get hitched tonight after the panel, we can talk to Sarah about that.
Two of my models, they were like, we're going to get married, but we want to do it in that because it's already about intimacy, but we want to feel it like this, not like a ceremony. And I was like, well, then we'll just get you married. And so, so we did that.
I love the fact that she does nothing small, even though that's her name. Everything she does is grand in scale and intent. It's amazing.
So how did you take the next step from Delirium Construction to your current work?
So, where to go from that? The next step. In full transparency, after the Delirium Constructions I felt pretty depleted of energy. And I sort of went insular for the next couple years and felt quiet and didn't really know exactly what the next step was. I was writing a lot of music in private, hang out with my cats a lot. And then I had, at the time when I started making these performances, so between 2009 and 2011, I made 8 smaller tableaus to explore the different kind of creative, make building blocks to make the big piece. And so I had a friend of mine document that process. And so right now I have an archive of probably 200 plus hours of unique footage from different angles and stuff of the process of making these tableaus. And for the last several years, I've been looking for an editor to come on board to edit this, what I thought was going to be a documentary of the process together. And then I somewhat recently realized within the last few years that I didn't want to make a documentary because that's uninteresting to me. This already happened, and why kind of re-explore it? So I realized that all to be said, I'm about to start digging into this archive of media and making more like a kind of fantasy fiction hybrid, maybe some documentary elements, but that's also not really relevant, kind of using the medium as a paint to create sort of just an experience and kind of orchestra of emotion or something visually, and so I'm doing that, and I'm working on finishing up the album, the record for the music that's in the film, and doing the package design for the album and stuff like that.
Can you talk a little bit about the imagery in the other video that you've got, Serial Dominance?
Yeah, sure.
You seem like a Svengali kind of character in it, at least from what I could see.
Like a what?
A Svengali character. You know, I'm someone who controls people like by the wiggle of your finger. Is there something about control?
Probably.
Like going on but go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. Let's see. So she's referring to the second piece. They're in a loop. First, there's the tableau with all the people, and then there's the smaller piece with the 3 ballet dancers. The question was, what's my understanding about the role that control plays in that piece?
I'm really curious about, I wasn't sure what quite was going on. Maybe that's the question.
Okay, yeah. I'm not sure exactly. Yeah. I don't know either. The way I usually address any sort of creative exploration is first, I just become excited about some elements, be it a couple people or a specific location with a person or just an idea or whatever it is, and then I have those as the building blocks, and generally it's people because I love people, I'm really curious about them, I like their interaction of unusual subjects together and playing with them and seeing what happens. So what I'll do is I'll bring together those elements and start with conversation and share about myself and ask a lot about like stories of people and just sort of see what unfolds. And so for Secondary Dominance, I knew I wanted 3 ballet dancers that were sort of a psychic representation of me as a child. And I realized after making this piece, a lot of it is about sort of individuation and like kind of what it's like to have your mother and your father inside of you, and what's yours and what's theirs, and kind of just the extrication process, and what's beautiful, what's haunting, like just, I don't know, I guess the complexity of what it's like to separate or something like that. So I wanted these 3 dancers to represent like, I don't know, different emotions of me as a kid and as an adult, this 3-headed something. Anyway, And then I wanted musicians to actually transcribe some of the music so the flutist and the cello could play their music. And I knew I wanted to work with projection, and I knew I wanted to get less scared about being a performer of my music that's not just a cappella music with my trio, which feels very safe. So those were the elements, and then my friend came to me and said, you know, Sarah, I'm not sure exactly what you're trying to make for this piece. A woman had come and commissioned it for a festival called Prototype Festival, which is a new music opera festival. And I didn't feel ready to make it exactly, but I just decided to dive in. And then my friend said, you know, Sarah, I feel like there's a sort of like a Wade-sized gap in this piece. And I was like, well, who's Wade? What's Wade? And he is a theater director and actor on Broadway, which is just an unlikely realm. Like I'm not that crazy about Broadway, so it felt a little disconcerting at first, but I trust the creative intuition of my friend, and I was like, sure, bring him on board. And I met, and immediately I was like, I want to play with this guy, I want to make stuff. So we just sort of made that, and I don't really know how it got made, we just made it, and then he was in it, and it's it is what it is. And I didn't know it was going to be performance. I thought it was going to be a record, just an album of this music. So, did I answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we should, in the interest of time, move on, and we can come back.
Yeah.
Share more. And Adam, I'm going to ask you to speak next. Sure. Are you doing photos? Are you making photography now still?
Yes.
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 Yeah. So I kind of bounce back and forth between photography, quote unquote film, but it's still video, and art video. So I do see those as three sort of distinct things, but they really blend together in my practice. So yes.
So how would you explain how the two here, which seem very different from each other, are all from one mind?
So the deluge, that's the orange suit archetype. I think that's the fourth video in a series of videos where this sort of lone character, and I refer to this person in third person, although it's me, sort of exists in this landscape and engages in Sisyphean task, and we were talking about optimism and pessimism. I think most days I'm a little bit more of a pessimist, but I want to embrace futility. And so the three other videos, which aren't here, and it's not good to talk about them, but they end a little bit more pessimistically. This video was originally intended where the boat sinks and the figure, I was going to kill this figure. I was going to kill the archetype. And he was going to drown. And I shot it. I shot it both ways, and it just seemed like it made sense, and it seemed like for me, though that series of videos, it was this embrace of obstacles, and it was also me kind of working through, like, every day we have things that we have boulders that we have to push up the hill. So I ended up embracing that and sort of emerging from the water is almost like this baptism, maybe. So that was that one almost is kind of an end note to something that was longer. And this new piece is, you were mentioning working with archival footage. So this is all Marfa, Texas. I don't know if you can tell from the two videos, but place in general and geographic location is particularly important to me because I feel like I really absorb a place where I am, and it's reflected in the people, it's reflected in the sounds and the culture. And so Marfa, Texas, when I went, was this really unique place. And so I was given a task by a archival house in the UK. They gave me free access to all of the archives they have, and they wanted me to make kind of a minute-long piece. So I took a voicemail from an archive. I've been collecting voicemails, just like it's how I sort of work through different stages in my life. I have these people that are really important, and so this voicemail is from a friend of mine. We've known each other for 17 years, and you know, we've helped each other through a lot of things, and we made that trip together. And Marfa in general is the only place that we've ever been where, and he says it in the video, it feels like we would go back and it just wouldn't be there. And in fact, the Marfa that we knew is not, it's not there anymore. It's very different, and I enjoy what it is now, but it's very different, and so it just, it's kind of a nostalgic homage to what was, and then referencing, you know, using archival footage to kind of create, that has no association with itself, these disparate pieces. I want to kind of make a continuous narrative with that, like a challenge, sort of a challenge for myself. So, and that's more of the direction I'm going now, is working with archival footage as well. So that's it.
Tell them about the project you're working on about Phoenix City.
so
I'm going to brag on him.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine.
Adam won an Idea Capital grant this past year to work on a project about his hometown, Phoenix City.
Mm-hmm. Phoenix City, Alabama.
Yes. Sin City. So our radar immediately went up, and we want to know what happened in Sin City. So in the historical bent that he handles so beautifully, he's investigating some serious business.
It is. No, it's so much. A lot of my work centers around sort of how bizarre we are as human beings, because I feel awkward and bizarre and strange and quirky. All of those things that you were talking about, that sort of these undertones of some of the work, I try not to take myself too seriously, but also at the same time, throughout history, there's a lot of dark things. There's a lot of negative things that have happened. We've been horrible to one another, and so Sin City, as it was called, from about 1936 to 1945-ish. Phoenix City, Alabama. It's where I was born, and
it's not misspelled. It has no O in it.
Right. People would say Phoenix, Arizona is misspelled, but that, you know, there was political unrest. There was, it's close to a military base. So, but the military base is in Georgia. It's in Fort Benning. I don't know if you guys know where that is. Next to Columbus, Georgia. And so the area was kind of ripe for drug trafficking, gambling, prostitution. These things that in the 40s were like, people were like, it's really taboo then. And so soldiers would sort of come over the bridge and engage in all of these sort of illegal activities, while the police, and the politicians would sort of look the other way because they were getting paid by these sort of mafia-type personnel. And so I'm kind of diving in the archives in Birmingham, diving in the archives in Athens. I've been going through Columbus. The Columbus Museum actually has a lot of relics that I've been going through. There was also, in 1955, there was a film called The Phoenix City Story. It's like this really bad B movie, kind of like a film noir type, crime story. Crime is another thing that's sort of come up a lot in my work. And so I'm really interested in diving into that work and creating some new fictions, but also sort of highlighting some stories that may not have been told. It ended in, the idea of Sin City ended in 1955 with the murder of Albert Patterson, who was running for mayor at the time, and he was running on the platform that he was going to clean up the town. And in an alley in Phoenix City, he was gunned down at like 9 p.m., which apparently was really late at the time. And then martial law was declared by the governor, and the military police came in and threw all of the gambling paraphernalia and closed down all of the bars and kicked out all of the corrupt cops. So it was like this instantaneous flip. But the city itself has really never dealt with its past. It's like just brushed it under the rug. And so I'm getting a lot of kickback. I'm also discovering there were other things that just were not written about or not talked about. I'll kind of wait and see if they're true or not. I'm going to bring them up anyway in the work, but I kind of want to know if they're true or not before I divulge some of that. But that's what I'm diving into.
Is it going to be narrative, or is it going to be more like the Marfa piece?
Yeah,
sort of?
It's kind of going to be these little pieces of narrative that could be sort of moved around like a jigsaw puzzle. Hopefully, that's the idea. And some of it will be photographs, some of it will be archival footage, some of it will be new video. So I'm interested in sort of going to these places where something significant happened during that era. What does it look like now? How have the people dealt with it? The alley, for example, where Albert Patterson was shot, there's just a tree with a swing set painted on the wall. It's just kind of but that alley kind of has significance in the story, in the narrative, but you wouldn't know that without reading into the work a little bit. So that's the idea. Hopefully the viewer is rewarded by sort of diving into the story that's there.
And is there a voiceover or?
So I am interviewing a few people that are still alive that can give me first-hand or second-hand accounts from some of these stories. So there will be audio pieces, components to that, but a lot of it, I'm really interested in just diegetic sound, just the sound that's there. The piece we were talking about, it kind of seems somewhat insignificant, the boat piece. But I hope that it gives you just a sense of, it gives you more of an experience of being there. So that's what a lot of the sound will be, more diegetic sound of the place.
Carl, you dig deep. You've been
Batting cleanup for the home team.
You've been mining your town for a long time, since you moved from New York, and working in series. This is a long, but as you said, some of on your website you have names for different series, but in your head it's all one piece. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming out tonight, by the way. I appreciate everybody being here, and thanks Annette and Mary for having me. I think the tangential way to work in smaller series was just part of the vogue in the early 90s and mid 90s. Typology was a very topographical subject, I'll say, in terms of how to arrange a body of work or how you think about making a body of work. And so I constructed for myself a number of different series, one series after another, that were very specific to a particular part of the culture that I live in, my neighborhood, the architecture, the people around that I bumped into. And they were thought of as sort of different series. The first one, I think Annette has a few pieces here. It's called Men of Georgia. And that was the first thing that kind of out of the gate from moving here from New York was very visually striking to me, just the people that you would encounter and the types of people that you would see. And I was very attracted to that and really enjoyed the visual presence, and their relationship with architecture is also another important aspect of that. But as I've moved through the series and harvested, layers of peeling back the onion in a very small community, to look for photographic imagery that was interesting and had a relevance and might be able to stand on its own legs somewhere else. I realized that, ultimately I'd been working on the same series the whole time I'd been there. And so now I think of the body of work as a real just an amalgam of all of the tangential parts, and I see a distinction, but I think that they work together. I hope they work together.
What does systems of organization mean?
Systems of organization was a body of work that was initiated from in the late 90s and early 2000s, looking at storage systems and ways of organizing merchandise in stores, and it was just a very literal transaction. And I just finally discovered one day that I felt like that as a title for a body of the work, it might be really good because it's a very similar construct sometimes with the way that we view society and our culture, and just the way that we view our world. So I felt like systems of organization was applicable to the whole body of work.
So when we were talking earlier, we were talking about the people whom you are drawn to. It's not the glamour group, it's the ordinary people doing ordinary things. Now there might even be a political overlay to some of your photographs, I
Indeed.
think.
Yeah.
And could you elaborate on that?
Well, I'll start by saying that I don't know that if any one person is ordinary. I think everybody...
Yes, I use that in quotes.
I know, but I just want to be clear.
Okay.
I don't think there is any particular, way that, anybody is, what's the word I'm after, has, I've lost my train of thought, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Just-
We were talking about the kind of people you're drawn to and what you see in them and what you're trying to say about them.
Yeah, well, initially I was really believing that they didn't have a voice, that they didn't have a presence. Particularly coming from New York, I felt like that there was a great deal of imagery and iconography that I was seeing that I grew up with in North Alabama in the 60s, and I just had been living in a New York City bubble and felt like that our culture and society had moved forward somewhat. So when I came to North Georgia and was seeing the same characters that I more or less grew up with. So I felt like that needed to be shown. And that, these people and us and all of us were, still in the same mess we have been in. And that's become more of a prevalent topic of conversation, and certainly in light of recent events and political times.
How do you establish a rapport? Are these your neighbors, or how do you establish a rapport with these?
I think honestly that I have an awkward presence, and that they're so shocked that they just let me photograph them, and then it seems to work somehow. But actually, a lot of the people that I photograph, I will speak to, and most people will tell you their life story within the first 5 minutes of meeting them. Given the opportunity, people seek attention, and so it's amazing what you'll hear, if you say you're going to listen.
Well said. Well said. Mary, do you have anything you'd like to add about how you selected these artists to
Well, I think
your
one of
show?
the things that is really strong to me in this exhibition is the fact that a lot of the topics and the imagery that's on the walls here is not unusual, but the way in which these artists address it, and Carl is a perfect example of the respectful way in which he photographs a person, that you see much more into the person and into their soul than you would in a dozen other pictures of the same topic and the same type of person. I think that the engagement of the photographer in the work that they're doing. Clearly, every single one of the people up here at this table loves what they're doing, and it comes through loud and clear in their work. And I am not trained in art. My background is in nursing and hospital administration, and I did that for 25 years. And this is my retirement career. And I wanted it to be fun. And that's why the humor, coupled with the respect and the dignity that they give to the subject material that they're speaking, to me is the thing that engages and keeps me wanting to look deeper into the photographs. Obviously, a great photograph looks good when you first look at it, and then you get surprises every time you go back and dig deeper into it. And each one of the people at the table, and many of the people that are in this exhibition, are masters of that craft. They look very, very deeply, and they think very, very hard about what they're trying to say with their work, and it comes through. From everything from Amanda Green, who spent 16 years on the West Coast and came back to Clayton, Georgia, and the joy that she sees in the southern landscape is something that, people photograph that same stuff every day, but you don't have that sort of sense of uniqueness, that special humor, and that sort of patience that it takes to get the right image. And that's something that I was impressed. One of the first conversations I had with Carl, I'm a juror for the fence, the Photoville fence, and I see a lot of really bad amateur pictures. I mean, there are 2,200 entries, 6 photographs apiece, and that's a lot of screen time. And if you've read any of the research, the more time you spend on the screen, the more sad and depressed you become. So the fence was certainly one of those moments, because there's a lot of aspiring photographers, a lot of untrained photographers that think they get it. And there's also a lot of really great photographers that present work for that platform, but don't engage. And the trick of that particular project is telling a story in 6 frames. And we all know how to tell a story over 2 hours and how few people will be interested in that story. So somebody that can tell a big story in a single picture or a grouping of pictures is somebody that gets my respect. So I asked Carl, would you consider applying to the fence? And Carl told me, it put me right in my little place, which I ran to, and said, I would never put my work in a situation like that, because the way that I present my work is thoughtful in every single inch of the print, the thing, that. He didn't go into great length, but I got it right away. And I was like, I'm following this guy forever. Because that is the discipline and the tenacity that I respect and admire in a good photograph, is somebody that's cut out all the noise and saved me the time, and given my eyes something that I can really eat up like it's on my plate in a delicious meal.
Thank you, Mary. Is there anything that any of you feel that we didn't talk very long about, any of you weren't able to talk very long about your work, that's something really important that you would like to share with us that we haven't touched on at all? Sarah?
Tons of stuff to talk about.
Okay.
Anyone have a topic they want to throw out at me, and I'll speak to it.
You and I were talking about listening earlier, and listening to others, and sort of being empathetic, and Carl, you just mentioned it, So I don't know, maybe that could be kind of a jumping off point where I feel like if you're going to be an artist in the world and you're going to be trying to tell stories about what it means to be human, I feel like I learn best by sitting and watching and listening to others and how they navigate the world. And I feel like even though the three of us, the work up here is very different, but I feel like we might have a similar take on just listening to others and then responding. The response is what's different.
Yeah, I very much relate to that. That was the first conversation. We just met this evening. We got right into that topic, and you were just speaking that, to that as well. So yeah, I mean, I know for myself, when I go into a relationship with a new subject, it's very free form and flexible, and it's really just about listening and asking questions and hearing and being very, very present. And it's playtime until it's not, until the thing that's supposed to happen emerges. And once that emerges, I am acutely dictatorial. I'm like, I see that's what it's supposed to be, and I'm very exacting with what I want to then bring to the surface. But it does start as listening, and it's very human, and it's, I think, inappropriate because it's boring to try to apply something onto a subject or a space that isn't there naturally. It's not interesting to me or the place or the person.
Did you have an individual relationship with each of the 120?
Yeah.
And were they eager to take off their clothes, or what was the nudity, the importance of the nudity, and how did that come about?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. We kind of had a brief conversation about, was that you and I? Yeah, we talked a little bit about that. I spoke with somebody earlier about that. I forget.
Well, tell everyone.
Okay. So yeah, when I think about the people that don't have their clothes on in the piece, I don't actually think about them as being nude. I think there's a really clear, at least in my mind, difference between a nude piece of work or a nude photograph and a naked photograph. And I feel like the people without their clothes in this work are naked people. And when I think of a naked person, I think of somebody, I think of reveal, and I think of a sort of form of vulnerability and saying, like, here is me, and here is more of me, and here is all of me, sort of. And so the people who have clothes on in the piece, I think of as just as naked as the naked people. And I was talking to, I don't know if you guys know the work of Spencer Tunick, but I had talked to him shortly after this piece, and he was like, well, why wasn't everyone naked? It just doesn't make sense. And I was like, well, I wouldn't make a piece like that because there's no tension then. It's not interesting because then you don't see the identity. You just see a bunch of naked people in a cluster, which is a beautiful thing, but it's a different thing. So I guess that the nakedness is one of many elements that bring forth reveal, openness.
And was that something you suggested or requested?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been photographing people who are naked since I was probably 13, which is probably maybe not legal. I don't even know, but
How old were they?
My age, But so that's just been something that's been a part of the material that I draw from when I explore interaction. And so that was natural, a kind of a natural thing to happen next when building the performance. But the people are the people that I had photographed before, but they're also, I got so excited about the scale of this and what that would feel like to receive. And also just selfishly to like be inside of and like move around inside of it. I did a lot of street casting, so I would just talk to people and get to know them on the subway or on the streets or wherever, and just tell them about the project and tell them what excited me about them and ask if they wanted to be involved. And you would be surprised how many people, a lot of the people who came to this project came with the same sort of story, that they were interested in trying something that scared them and being around new communities. And I think that's highly important right now, not to get into the whole technology conversation, but we don't see each other. People need to touch each other and breathe each other's air. And I don't mean in a sexual way, I mean in we need to reconnect because we spend our lives online cataloging people in this way, So I think this piece feels culturally very important to me. And I think these people left feeling a new sort of openness with the people around them.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question.
Carl, we didn't talk about the project that you're working on with Fall Line Press. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I just have I don't know if any of you know Bill Bowling, who is a publisher here in town with Fall Line Press. And we've had a kind of a book on the back burner, or on the front burner, and then on the back burner again for a couple of years now. And I think in the bio it says 2016, but we're hoping in 2018. So the book title will be called Systems of Organization, and it's kind of just an encapsulation and edit from the last 25 years worth of work. And we hope to present it in a way that's entertaining and not laborious, and it'll strike a chord. So that's an opportunity.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to put a question to our artists? Ruth?
What community are you talking about?
Oh, Athens, Georgia. I'm sorry.
Athens, Georgia. That's where you were born?
No. We moved there in 1990.
Are you from the South?
I'm from Athens, Alabama, coincidentally.
So both you and Adam are, I'm sorry,
Yes.
are from small Alabama towns?
That's
and
correct.
You go left and expand your scope?
Yeah.
Expand one book and then return?
We hope
To
so.
small towns? Well, I would be interested to hear how this broader scope overlaps with your experience in the art that you're making there now.
Sure. Well, I left Phoenix City as soon as I could, and I moved promptly to Los Angeles, and it was a whole new world for me. And I've since then I just kind of bounced around, and I was in Mexico City, I was in Maine, I would go from urban to rural and just bounce back and forth like every year. I don't know how that happened. And then I ended up coming back actually to Athens to go to graduate school, and that was the first time I had stayed in one place since leaving Phoenix City, and it happened to be this sort of beautiful blend of art, music, culture, but at the same time had that sort of small town feel, but at the same time you still have everything that you've seen and learned out in the world beyond this sort of small, echo chamber that was Phoenix City. And so for me, I feel like, especially if you live in a small town, I feel like leaving that place and coming back to it gives you such a fresh perspective. And I know that this, maybe it sounds cliche, but it's absolutely true. I was scared to come back because I thought I might actually like it coming back, and that's not necessarily the case. I wouldn't say that I like it or I love it. I say that I understand it more, and that's because that perspective that was provided by leaving, and so the reason I understand it more is because I look more, because you think you know something until you leave and come back, and that's kind of the way I feel like my relationship is with this small town. And so I don't know, maybe Kristen Berry is someone similar in that way, leaving and coming back.
I don't know. Good question. For me, it was more Athens is a small town, and if you drive out from Athens, further east particularly, it's like the clock never moved from 1942 on or something. And so the challenge for me was to find the contemporary within that context. And so a large part of the work is documenting more or less. If any photography can be a document, we'll just not have to analyze that right this second, but that's a whole nother question. But my goal through the whole years that I've been doing the work is to find the contemporary perspective within that milieu, because again, I was driven by the fact that I felt like it was really important to work with material and culture and people that I felt had an authenticity to them that weren't manufactured in some form or fashion to be marketable or to be, you know, I just come from New York where image consciousness is the height of, you know, the conversation, and what you look like and what you wear and how you present yourself is critical to the level of success you may or may not have. And so I was attracted to people who that wasn't the primary concern of the way that they looked or acted or, you know, behaved. And I sort of mistakenly felt, because I think that there was a certain level of authenticity within that was very attractive to me. And I say mistaken because I now believe that authenticity survives in all forms, and not just that particular one. So that's been fun to address. But my goal throughout the whole series was to find the contemporary within that context, and finally I realized toward the end that the contemporary was my perspective only. So that was the sort of revelation from 25 years' work. Thank
It's
you.
always so interesting how biography affects art, you know, the small town or the traveling, and you're imagining your parents, that stuff, the whole image of you separating from your, that this arose from the idea about separating from your parents. Did I hear that correctly? Or finding yourself?
I think maybe it didn't arise from that, but that's what I realized it was after I made it.
Very interesting.
Where am I from? Washington, D.C. Yeah, and I live in Brooklyn. I'm in California temporarily, but I live in Brooklyn for the last 17 years. Yeah, I like cities.
Are there any other questions? Would you like to add something?
If I can just
Mary?
take a quick moment. First of all, to thank all of you for coming tonight. This has been just a great, attentive turnout, and I really appreciate that. But just like to take a quick moment to thank a few very special people. First of all, Amy Miller set me on this journey, the executive director of Atlanta Celebrates Photography. She gave me the opportunity to creatively come up with my vision of what needed to be watched, and that has been such a joyful mission and has carried me so many places and introduced me to some really amazing people. So thank you, Amy. Second of all, Annette Cohn-Skelton. Annette, when I decided I wanted to have my retirement career, there were 3 art consultants in Atlanta, and I decided I was going to follow Annette around and sweep her floors until she taught me how to be an art consultant, and it's been a wonderful journey. And I've loved being part of MOCA. I've been on the board here for 12 years, and if anybody in this room is not a member, you got to change that really quick. Step up and be part of this organization that supports Georgia artists in such a wonderful way. And then I've got a lot of great ideas and a ton of energy, as you know. I can exhaust most people in minutes or certainly in weeks. But there are a few people that have worked tirelessly on helping me with this exhibition. First of all, Stephanie Sutton, and Elena Best. Elena. both of whom work with me at Mary Stanley Studio and have gotten the work up on the walls here in just such a beautiful way. They took my vision for this exhibition and elevated it to just an amazing, amazing end. Also, Rob Chamberlain, who is new to my team, but has done a really great job, and Shine Huang from SCAD, my new intern. Thank you all so much. It has been a pleasure to work with you on this trek. And then finally, the Young Collectors Club. There are a lot of you here tonight. The other artists that are in the show, it goes without saying, I'll kiss your feet on a daily basis. Jody, Nancy Floyd, Amanda Green, everybody else that's not here. They're all super, super artists. And if you want to support them, buy their work, because that really helps support them. I mean, it's just a crazy thing. And the Young Collectors Club are making a big difference in Atlanta community because they are educating themselves, they're learning about contemporary art, and they are buying and supporting these wonderful people. So thank you all for your help in putting this on as well. Kathy, you're my idol in terms of art criticism. I don't write a paragraph without thinking about how much I don't know about this craft. It's so important and such a necessary part of the world that we live in, and all the artists that have a chance to get a look from you or a word from you in print are so grateful for your eye and your talent. So
Well,
thank you too.
Well, what I want to say is I want to make a little button that says talk to an artist, because I never cease to be fascinated and illuminated, and the work means so much more to me when I hear from you all. And I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts and your emotions, and for expressing yourself in ways that we can all enjoy. Thank you for coming.
Hear, hear.